we asked people to send in their samples so I could critique them. We're only going to do 3 of these. We got many that came in for contributions. The first one we're going to bring up is Ben Gaston. These are his works right here. We're going to take them one at a time. So this one right here, let me look at this right here. It's got a good solid start, Ben. I can tell that you really like what you do. This kind of reminds me of the work of, is it Gory? Is that his name? The guy that had the PBS animation stuff up there. You know, this is, I think a guy like Ben should stick to a stylized, graphic, kind of half cartoon and half realistic style right here. I think he's leaning towards that. And that seems to be what his preference is. I like the water render. I like the rendering of the water down there. The water and the reflections always work very well. And the fact that he's got black around there with just a few hints of waves really makes the orange stand out. We're going to move on to a still life here that Ben did right here. Pears and the standard still life setup that we all need to practice with, because that's how you learn reality, is by practicing anything from life. In this case, the time-honored practice was to simply set up some fruit that doesn't move and doesn't talk back and doesn't need breaks. So that's why we use things like that for still lifes. I don't know what kind of medium he did this in. It's obviously an oil, I would say, but it looks like some kind of gouache / acrylic kind of an affair. You know, all this is good, but he's kind of taken this to the halfway point as far as realism goes. If Ben wants to go full realistic, this is where the training needs to come in. You can only get training, I think, properly from another teacher who you happen to really like. If you're looking at somebody who does fantastic still lifes, this is what I went through back in '87. I found a guy that was incredible at the portraits in oil and still lifes from the New York Students League School. Still is working there, Greg Kreutz. And I learned from guys like that. Otherwise, if I hadn't learned from them, if I hadn't taken those classes, I couldn't do half of what I do. So I am not self-taught in any way at all. Self-taught part comes in after you learn from your teacher and you go home and you take notes and you practice and practice and practice what you spend so much money on, and you sleep well at night. And this is a very nice piece right here. He's got a style that is very suited for the comic book illustration field. He needs a little bit more polish in practice on bringing things all together. If you look at Mignola's work, he's got a very strong graphic style, minimalism. If you study his work, he really knows how to make things count with far less work actually put into the panels or the page than a lot of guys, like a Jim Lee type or something like that. Color scheme is nice. The girl in the background works well. So I would say a little bit of schooling is needed here to really up your abilities here. Let's move on to Michael Gardner. This is Michael Gardner's work right here. He's going to be the second person I'm going to critique over the airways right here. This is very interesting stuff right here. This is a case of a guy that's got really good rendering skills. His draftsmanship is a couple notches below the actual rendering. This is where the solid knowledge of either working really hard at something, getting good teachers, or working with a mentor of some kind is really going to help up his game to from a C to a B to an A. But he's got a lot of stuff going on right here that shows he's got a very natural talent. I don't know what the age of Michael is, but it's got some impressive work, and he can really go places if he keeps learning stuff. We have a sculptor right here. Yes, a sculptor can join in. As Heads of Toys has written in here. You can see the Nexus heads that he's constructed here. I assume this is, I hope this isn't CGI. I hope it's the real thing. I can't tell from here. It looks actually like CGI to me, which is something I don't really get. So if you want to buy some computers, I am the worst guy to go to. I'm here to teach you traditional skills, working with traditional tools, because that's where I learn, and that's what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. Otherwise, the actual rendering skills I use with this right here is very impressive. This guy is ready to have hireable skills. You need to be ready to use that good. So let's set aside the critiques for right now. We'll do more critiques as they come in. We've got several more to go over, but we'll save that for next week. The last thing that came in right here, apparently there's a thing going on to rename a certain New York street under the name of Jack Kirby. Just sign it. You can't go wrong with that. This guy writes in, Juan writes in, and He's having back problems. What guy that works on a desk that doesn't have back problems? Well, there's a couple ways to remedy that. One is to spend $1 billion going to a chiropractor over and over and over until he or she actually helps you, which is dubious. There's the pills, obviously, which I will take in a second just to avoid the pain. The worst back problem I ever had came at the age of 31 or 32. I was working for First Comics and meeting deadlines every month, and it was tough. I remember getting up with my in the morning after resting for an entire evening, where my back was spasming. In the morning after working for several months on deadlines with Nexus, and my back was spasming so bad, I had to literally crawl to get to the room next to start work again. So we kind of want to avoid that if we can. But yeah, this is a consideration of everybody that has a back situation going on. Obviously, do the obvious by getting a good chair. This is a good chair right here. If you've ever seen the chairs that people work in before these ergonomic things came about right here, that actually massage your back and give you heat to calm your pain down. If you've ever seen Jack Kirby's chair, it was just a chair. People try to talk him into getting a more modern, updated chair after seeing one that he worked in for his entire life. But certain people become attached to certain things. And this is the case of the chair that Jack had his entire life. Same with his drawing board, all cut up and beat up and stuff. And his little tiny tabaret at the right of his drawing board. Now you can see that with my setup right here, I am anything but small fry operation. I have everything stored here. The desk is exactly how I need it next to me here. With all these things, Jack had 1/10 of what I have. And he would get out the dyes and paint his things and do his collages from photographic cutouts and all his comic book work with 1/10 of what I have here. So that'll put things in perspective for you, you guys living today, you Gen Xers and all this other kind of stuff. Think back to the times of the Depression, and that's what you're gonna get with a guy born in 1917. So yeah, Kirby, absolutely back problems. Do what you can about that. Here's a guy that was practicing some letter balloons right here, which is pretty cool actually. He took the time to really incentivize himself right here, practice his lettering. Now this is obviously the secret formula right here to learning something. He practiced at it. Is that a good thing? You couldn't do it any other way. My life is all about practice. You guys know that. All the books in my library here, the billions of books that I've accumulated throughout my lifetime, they're all to be plucked from the bookshelf and studied over and over and over. By the way, there's a guy on YouTube that came up with something that I'm going to explain to you about learning faster. And it's nothing more than a memory method that I actually thought up about 20 years ago when I was still living in LA at our last house before we moved here to Arizona. And the basic memory trick is to look at something, look at it hard, close your eyes, and see what you remember. This is a trick that I would kind of thought up to help me memorize things in my head longer. And it worked. It did work. So I would look at something like a truck that was parked outside, and I would stare at it. And then I would close my eyes and see what I remembered in the inside of my brain from having stared at it so long. And then when I would come up with things that I don't remember, I would open my eyes again, stare at it some more. And you would do this again and again until you actually got to the point where your mind would retain the image as closely and as fully as possible before you go into your studio and try to render it from memory. It gave me a headache, but it's, what the heck, right? It's what we go through to learn our craft better. And I found that I could remember the stuff that I had focused on to store in my memory up to 2 weeks. And I can honestly, it's been 20 years since I saw that truck at my old house in LA. I can still remember some details from that. Okay, so that's the power of that. Some guy writes in here and he's talking about the moment it returned to Earth, which I'm currently working on, where Nexus and his family moved to Earth. That's the title. And he's making comments about the time he moved and had to pick out the excitement of having to pick out his own room and meet his new friends. And He also made a comment that I'm going to bring up, which is why I kind of picked out this letter to elaborate on. You also get the kind of feeling that Nexus has an unsureness about him at the same time. This is quite correct. Nexus is a guy that is as human as anyone else. He happens to have powers that can blow up an entire planet if he so chooses. He gets the power from the solar power from the sun. He somehow is able to channel that immense power, that immense nuclear power, store it in his body somehow, in the cells of his body, and use it as a power source when he needs it, which I'm sure comes in handy. I wouldn't really have one myself. I like the comment he made about Nexus seems a little unsure at times. Well, he does. That's part of his personality. He grew up isolated from people. He didn't learn social skills until way later on, and even then it took a while. So that's going to do it for today. I think I covered everything we need to. When you guys, we need new Patreon guys. We're going to be making some major spick-o-spit announcements coming up here as far as the animated Nexus show goes. Other than just your fantastic self-sacrifice of the finances that you help us with here to keep things going. I will continue to look at anything you send in, critique it over the airwaves here. My job here is to first interact with you guys. Second is to give you any kind of feedback that I can to make your life easier and not harder. And then there's going to be a little bit of my various philosophies scattered throughout and sprinkled here and there, but I think are going to be in direct contrast to what everyone else says out there. I'm very direct, but at the same time, I'm very compassionate to the things that everyone is going through there, no matter what their age. So that's going to be it for this week's live stream. Look for it to be Lesson Live coming up on YouTube. So hang in there, guys. I look forward to your comments next time. We'll see you and work hard. Take care.